Just a
Yeah.
thumbs up. Yeah, great. Well, hi everyone. I'm Charles. I work at GDS on the Data Standards Authority team. I am going to do two things in this talk today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Data Standards Authority and what we're trying to do. Then I'm going to tell you in somewhat more detail about the the government API catalog, because that's my particular, let's say, hobby horse rather than obsession. It's 55 minutes. I appreciate that's a long time for you to have to listen to me. It was a little bit more manageable when there were going to be two of us. But so what I suggest we do is, if you throw any questions you have as we go in the chat, I'll stop at various points to take questions, see if anyone has anything to contribute, generally recover from speaking non-stop. And I don't want this to be a 55-minute lecture. We're really keen, as I will talk about in this, to do more successful engagement with local government. And so I am really looking for your suggestions and comments on how we can do that. I know it's not always been a huge success in the past. So anyway, on with the show. So as I said, I'm Charles. I work for the Data Standards Authority. The Data Standards Authority was set up in the spring budget, so only stood up in April. I joined in July, so we're a very new team. And obviously, this year has been an interesting one to start any new teams and projects. But it's been a year which has shown at a lot of levels the need for better use of data. That's where we think we can help. That's where we're looking to learn and spread those learnings across the whole of government. What is the Data Standards Authority for? I promise I won't just read out the slides for it. It's hard when that one just came up in front of me. The Data Standards Authority is to improve how government shares and uses data. It is, I'm sure none of you need to be told that data sharing across government is not great. I came from the private sector this year into government. Data sharing across the private sector is not great either, but at least there are kind of commercial imperatives there. The government failures in data sharing tend to be much more to do with siloed information, a lack of adhering to standards, a lack of discoverability, which I will harp on about enormously today, and the difficulty of getting access to the data, even if you know that it's standards based and you know that it's where it is and what it does. So we have a number of different ways to that we're approaching to improve those. The first of them, which is more about the general DSA work stream, is around standards and guidance around standards. So the first bit, the first deliverable that the DSA produced in July was guidance around metadata in government, in terms of how it should be used, where it should be used, about where you should use schema.org, where you should use Dublin Core, generally looking to give a jumping off place for people in government using metadata. Now, we would say that a standard that is published but not implemented and not taken up isn't a standard at all, it's just a specification. So another big work stream for us is the API Catalogue, which is designed to improve discoverability of data sources, help people understand both what is out there, what's available, what's in use, what the current best practice is, and spread those best practices across government. Finally, a big not finally, but in this particular summation, a big work stream for us is around data access. We're trying to understand, and this is much more of a conceptual thing, we're trying to understand what the blockers are if you're trying to get access to data. Why, where are the pain points? Where do you fall down when you're trying to get access to things? Is it around MOUs? Is it around data sharing agreements? Is it just around the fact that you don't know who to talk to? So we've got a big push on at the moment to talk to a lot of people across government and find out where they have struggled, where they've succeeded in accessing data from other departments. So we talked about the metadata guidance that was published in July. That's the incredibly unwieldy URL, which I will share later, so you don't need to write it down now. But as I say, that was our first bit of our first deliverable and the first place, the first step on this particular journey for us. I want to talk a little bit about APIs in the abstract as opposed to the API catalog now, because I was talking to people at MHCLG on Friday, and we were talking about this presentation, about APIs across local government in general, and what we could do. And it was made that, the point was made that not everyone would necessarily understand the value of APIs. I don't want to get into a lesson about what APIs are and how they're useful, but I think just spend a couple of minutes maybe touching on it. We recognize that not every organization has got the resource to be rolling out APIs. We recognize that not every organization is in a position to be doing that. We think that most organizations across government could probably make use of APIs. 2020 has been a story of some really good successes around API use, but also, the kind of details of those successes often point to some of the problems around information sharing. So data sharing in particular. I always talk about the Shielded Vulnerable Persons Service, which obviously tied together central government, HMRC, DWP, with local authorities and the private sector with supermarkets to, deliver a life-saving service. At speed, but if you talk to the people who were involved in that, there were a lot of pain points around getting that data, around finding data in usable formats. So it is both a success story and a kind of rallying cry to try and get people to recognize the importance of APIs. And I am here to some degree using APIs as a bit of a catch-all for data exchange. We would like, everyone to be using standardized APIs, but we also realize that, it's the real world. But we feel like with APIs and data exchanges in place, then you can cooperate and collaborate, sharing data. You can innovate on top of that data and build new services. Another great example that someone gave me recently was a project that various fire services in London ran, where they took an API from the Food Standards Agency about restaurant hygiene, and they tried to plot fires to it to see that if you could use that data to predict the likelihood of restaurant fires. Now, the bad side of this story is that it wasn't a particularly successful experiment, but the ambition of it, I think, is impressive, and it's not always just about how can I more easily start a business, or how can I, although that's a very laudable aim, or how can I more easily submit documents to HMRC. Some of this is actually around finding new and innovative, not to harp on that word, approaches to problems. So that is my very whistle-stop tour of the setup of the DSA. Has anyone got any questions at this point? Just going to check in the chat, but I think that's a resounding no to questions. Okay, well, we'll push on, and if anyone thinks of anything, do shout out, and I will and I'll do my best to answer them. So as I said, I joined in July and was tasked to set up the government API catalogue. But why? As whenever I call people and explain to them that I'm setting up a government API catalogue, they ask me first. So there has been a government API catalogue in what you might call proof of concept stage for about a year now. It was set up on the back of the API and data exchange community, which has been run out of GDS for a few years. It was felt that it was hard to find APIs. If you wanted to get your hands on an API from a government department, how did you do that if you weren't already familiar with the landscape? So people at GDS threw up a prototype, which is pretty much still the same structure we're using right now. And when I joined in July, it had about 30 APIs on there. Hadn't had a huge amount of take up. And this year, for reasons that remain mysterious, there is a lot more interest in data across government. And there was a push from the centre, from the Cabinet Office, to create a map of the UK government APIs, to get a sense of what departments are using them, how they fit together. Can we identify departments who could be using APIs to share data across government and who aren't? Could we identify whether those departments who were meeting standards? Could we identify, if an API has been published, what services were making use of it? Now that's the kind of top-down pitch for the catalogue. I and the team around the catalogue have got more of a, let's say, community-led approach to this. We feel like there is a role for the API catalogue, and it is primarily to reduce overhead. And a lot of things then flow on from that. I spent a lot of time in the private sector running teams who built things on top of APIs. We would always find that the first 2 weeks of any project, if you were lucky, were locating the API that you wanted, finding the person who ran it, the team who ran it, and then finding the documentation. And if you were lucky, all of those things were published on the web. It met standards, and you could get going with it. But there was still a huge lag because you had to go out and do all those things. And let's face it, most of the time, one of those things was probably missing, and it was usually the first one. So you have to, you spend a lot of time as a project manager or a user trying to find out where these things are and what access you can get to them. We feel like if it did nothing else, the API catalogue, then just reducing the amount of time you spend searching for available APIs is a valuable service to provide. But we also feel that on the back of that, you get a lot of other benefits. So discoverability, as I said, I will say the word discoverability probably an unconscionable number of times during this session, but it allows you to get going with building services faster. It reduces overhead in that way. It will increase the reuse of services which are out there. So there's a famous example, and again, this is quite simplistic because there are objections to this, but my first conversation was with the DWP, and we talked about how they had just implemented an internal registry. We talked about how they'd done it and the successes they'd had, and how it was very difficult to manage a big federated estate of APIs and lots of teams producing different things. And they discovered that when they stood this thing up, that they had 14 separate address lookup APIs across the estate, all of which were fed by data dumps from Ordnance Survey. So they're all providing the same data. But lots of teams had, in the absence of being able to find one, just built their own. Fair enough. And you might say, well, that's a success. You go from 14 APIs to one API in the DWP to provide addresses. But I think that probably another question you might ask is, not only should there only be one address lookup API for the DWP, perhaps there should only be one for government, especially as the government owns several mapping agencies. who do this kind of stuff for a living. Now, there is, I don't know if there's anyone out there from the Geospatial Commission, but I can already hear objections being raised to that. There are obviously a lot of different use cases, but in the sense of just brutally cutting down the number of times developers do the same thing, build the same product, you know. And no one really wants to be doing that. Everyone wants to be building new things, doing stuff that hasn't been done yet. This is I think a laudable aim. And on the back of those, it just shortens time to delivery. Everyone wants that, right? You know, you think of something, it'd be good to get it out quicker rather than slower. So that is the big pitch around the practicalities of the catalogue for users and for developers. There's more to it, as I will come back to later, but those are the kind of initial pitch points. We see it also as addressing a need for transparency. Now, again, there are caveats to this, but you know, at GDS there is an ethos of working in the open. We believe that government services that are in use should be published, unless there is a compelling reason for them not to be. So we feel, and this is not really a GDS thing, but a Cabinet Office thing, a government thing in general, feel that there is value in a map of the API landscape. So you can see what APIs are being published, what departments are using them, what departments maybe could use them. And this isn't necessarily this isn't a stick with which to beat people about whether or not they're publishing APIs and stuff, but it is hopefully just a way to show what can be done. You know, a lot of problems, and again, it comes back to the multiple API address lookup APIs. A lot of problems being solved are similar, you know, and it helps to have a resource which can show you how other people have solved these problems, how you could solve these problems, what best practice looks like in this stage, it's, you know, again, it just adds to a level of transparency around government service, which we think is a laudable aim. Finally, there are 3 reasons for the API catalogue list. Data integrity. This is the API catalogue, because it is not, it's never going to be dealing with huge volumes of information. I mean, there are a lot of government APIs, but there aren't millions. At least I hope not. Because if there are, I've really been missing some stuff. But because we're talking about probably thousands of data sources over a large estate, the catalogue will be human curated. Any entry is going to be checked. There are programmatic checks so that we can check data integrity in terms of that the API returns what it says it will do, that it is that the endpoints are where they say they will be. But there's also a kind of human checking of that contacts are there, that these things are actively maintained, that they are addressing the data sources and the problems that they say they're going to. And again, this reduces overhead because it promotes trust in the data source. If we can do any of that, then again we're just reducing overhead. So before I make the big talk about what we want to ask, I'm going to stop again and see if anyone's got any questions around the catalogue, or if you've thought of any questions about the DSA from the first section. I guess not. Right, so let's move on. The DSA is a small team at GDS. Those of us involved with the API catalogue is an even smaller team. So we have favors to ask. At the moment, actually, this has just gone up this morning, but as of Friday night, the API catalog had 161 APIs on it from 17 departments, of which only 2 were local authorities. We are very keen to get people involved. We're very keen based on services like the Shielded Vulnerable Persons service, where we know that real services that make a difference in people's lives are built in conjunction between central and local government. But equally, we're aware that it's not really viable for us to ring up every data chief across every local authority and every arm's length body and every government agency across the country and say, oh, can we have your APIs? Let's put them into the catalogue. We need to build a community around it, get a wider input into this. And how we do that, first of all, is with the API and data exchange community. So that's a group we've been running for a couple of years now, as previously mentioned. We have it ran meetups every few months until the pandemic came in. We've just started running them again. We ran one last week on the API catalog in general, API management around government. We are planning another one for the beginning of November, and it's got I think about 150 users in that group, but they are in large part from the big central data producing, data consuming departments. We'd like to extend that community out so that it's got a lot more local government representation in there, so it's got a lot more representation from the arm's length bodies and the agencies around the country, because we feel like not only is it good for us in terms of getting people to engage with the catalogue, to add their APIs to it, but also because this is how the API catalog fits in with the wider work of the Data Standards Authority. We will shortly be starting to work on version 3 of the government API standard, and we want to use the API catalog to feed that, to look at what is best practice on the ground, to look at what people are using, to feed drafts of it to the community and say, what are we missing, or what is unreasonable on this. So that is the value of the community to us. And I think it's a valuable resource to the people involved, because you get to meet the people in other departments you might not run into in your day-to-day life, and you get to exchange war stories with them, basically. How have you solved this problem? We're having a nightmare with doing this. How have you looked at that? That there are departments and organizations who are at varying stages in their API journey, let's say, just to coin a terrible phrase. They are looking to solve problems, some of which have been solved before, some of which haven't, but which, when aired among the community, maybe seem a little bit shallower. So the community both acts as a resource for its members, and we throw quite a good workshop, though I say it myself, but also in a more conceptual way, it does drive the adoption of standards, and then it drives the focus of the Data Standards Authority and the wider data community within government. That if there are particular things which are perceived as important by the community, we are invariably driven that way. So it's very valuable, and it lets us. There has been a bit of a conception across government that GDS and the Cabinet Office more generally sits in the centre, doesn't engage with what's actually in use, just issues these pronouncements about what you should do better. And we are very keen not to do that with this. I have been working in the data space for long enough to know that standards that are imposed centrally without any kind of input are rarely successful. So we are looking to get as wide and as broad a panel, if you like, of people who are going to review the standards, comment on them, and inform them as possible before we go forward. So that's the community. The second thing is just add your APIs. You know, the Catalogue address is about to come up. It's very basic at the moment. It's just a static site generated from a GitHub repo. You can add your API just by opening an issue. We're about to refine that slightly in terms of how you do it, so that it speeds it up a little bit. But basically, you know, it's as easy as can be in terms of getting your details in there. And you know, when you do, there is a big and growing number of people who are looking at this, and that, you know, I think that a lot of, you know, if a team puts up a successful API, they're often very proud of it, and we can offer a little bit of publicity, you know, a little bit of force multiplication in terms of getting eyeballs to it and getting used to that thing. So, and you know, another relevant story from the last few months is we've been talking to the UK Hydrographic Office, who have got an evolving API estate, and who want to get them out, who don't want to get the word out, because they want to both see them used by the public sector in general, but also, you know, these are commercial, commercial things as well, and they'd like to get more interest by them, not least because you know, the more we can publicize them, the more they can see what is working, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. What are the benefits? Well, I just started talking about them there. Use is the bottom line. You know, if you've stood up an API, you want people to use it. Of course, you want people to build interesting services on top of it. You're not going to get that without some publicity, at least some connection to the wider world. Obviously, you know, search engines, of which there are many, but Google is the first stop for a lot of people like this. But as I've had a lot of users say to me, why, you know, I can't trawl through 20 government developer portals to find the API I'm looking for. There needs to be one central place that is a first step for looking for these things. The new version of the API catalog adheres to our metadata guidance, and so it's very search engine friendly. So generally speaking, if you're looking for APIs in government, we are up there in the results. Not always first, but first, second, third, something like that. And it just drives traffic. Best practice, if you're looking to build an API, stand up an API, you know, you should be thinking about the standards. You should be thinking about best practice, of course, as with all things. We are just a way to, you know, check what is in use, check how other people have solved certain problems, and you know, if you're involved in this and you become part of the community, then again, as I say, you know, it allows you to drive the conversation of this going forward. So, has anyone got any questions about the API catalog, about data standards across government that I can address at this point?
Hey, Charles. It's David Drown from Hackney.
Hi, David.
I've got a couple of things about the community. First of all, we were having a chat a while back about the local government Slack. I wondered if you'd had an opportunity to nip over there and set up a channel to be able to invite people and get involved in the same way that you have on the main civil service across government.
I am now a member of local government Slack, and I have done a general reminder about the catalogue, but I think the idea about the channel is a good one, and I will do that soon.
Cool. I mean, yeah, a couple of other things. First one of which is, I don't know if you've spoken to the local digital, well, I believe earlier you said you've spoken to the local digital group at MHCLG, but I wonder if there's an opportunity. I don't know when the digital declaration refresh is going to happen, because there's a lot of local authorities across the country that have signed up to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if there's an opportunity when that next gets refreshed to suggest to people that becoming active in the community is one of the things they could have as one of their commitments as
Mm-hmm.
part of their renewal for that. So that might be an opportunity.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let me just answer that one, then you can come up with your last question. But I was speaking to that group at the end of last week, and they're very keen to be involved. They didn't mention the declaration, but they are talking about what they can, how they can help with this. And in terms of, I think from our perspective, it's about publicizing it in their interactions with local government. The declaration is a great idea, and it's similar to what we're trying to do with the guidelines and the TCOP, the Tech Code of Practice, where we are building in publication to the catalogue and joining that community as part of the update to that. But I think that's a good idea, and I'll talk to them about the declaration.
Cool. It's fantastic that's part of the Tech Code of Practice update. That's really good. Yeah, the last thing I was going to say, and I always feel obligated to introduce this, is every time someone's talking about community stuff, is that if you've not read it, Emily Webber wrote an absolutely fantastic 50-page book on community building, which has got huge amounts of excellent advice of how to do stuff, and I would heartily recommend it if that's something that you've not had an opportunity to have a look at.
I haven't, and that is a great suggestion. Thank you very much. I am writing that down right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
So on the declaration, it's Ben from the local digital team. We've got a session on Thursday. Nick, you might know the time, where we've got running a workshop on what should change with the declaration. What should we do for sort of declaration 2.0? So it's Thursday morning, I think, Nick.
Yeah, it's Thursday at 12 o'clock.
12. Cool, thanks, Nick.
Yeah, and there's a description on the local camp 2020 homepage, but you do have to, I think, email in Maddie. You've got to email in. There's an email address there, events@localdigital.gov.uk, because I think there's only 24 spaces on it. I think it's going to be a fairly interactive workshop.
Yes, I saw that, and I thought I probably wouldn't take up one of the places from someone who could be actually a useful participant rather than just a lurker.
Don't sell yourself short, Charles. I would sign up if I were you.
I will do.
Away.
Brilliant. Has anyone else got anything? Ben, I think when we talked the other day, we talked about how it might be useful to talk about the benefits of APIs. Do you think that's something I should spend a couple of moments on? I don't know how the level of appetite in this group is for me trying to explain API use.
I don't know. It's really a question for the group. Really, I guess my comment last week was that I don't think for lots of councils it's not the default position to work from creating an API first. So just sort of coming here today and asking councils to come and list all their APIs in the catalogue would not be a winner, because they probably don't exist yet in many cases. But I guess if people have got questions on sort of, I guess, how to get to the point of making an API or something, or the benefits of doing that, something Charles might be able to help with, or we can certainly be interesting to understand what would help you more, so that we can provide the right guidance either from the local digital team or for GDS.
Yeah, I'd back that up and say one of the things I've talked to various people about is, when we have these engagement meetings and saying, can you put your stuff on the API catalog? And they go, well, can you help us build APIs first? That does happen. And the DSA in general would like to be involved in that. We feel like it is a useful, it's a good use of our time to be pushing this. And sometimes it will be stuff that we have to farm out to better qualified people, but I think it's quite a useful we could be quite a useful clearinghouse. So if you have these kind of questions, then we tend to, because we're sitting at the middle of a number of networks around data, we tend to at least know who's working in that space and can put people in touch. So I think, yeah, perhaps rather than now trying to give a little lecture on API building, I'll just say my email's at the end. There's an email
Charles, before you, we've got Alex Stone here. He's got his hand up. He's unmuted, or she's Alex.
Hello.
Hello. Have you got a question for Charles?
I do, and great job, Charles. I think you're solo today unexpectedly. It's been a great presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
I was wondering about how we're going to, and how you and teams like Ben's might be able to help where there's a clear kind of need for an API, but it's not going to be obvious for any one local authority perhaps to take it forward. So for instance, I'm with Rushmore, and we were looking at our clinical waste service, and clinical waste is something that takes in a host of organizations that go across different boundaries, and there's a clear benefit to being able to share data, and API is an obvious way to do that. So how do we get to the point where we say, let's have a standard and start working to put that together?
That is a really good question, and I wish I had a better off-the-cuff answer for you than we'd like to talk to you and help with it. So I mean, that is the kind of conversation we're starting to have. So I mentioned the story about the fire service and their experiment with the Food Standard Agency's data. One of the things we are talking to them about is how we can help them create data standards around the data that they share. So they have got a lot of organizations with very different size and very different resource, but who have a very similar data need or a lot of overlapping data needs. And, you know, they don't know where to start. And so I think that is somewhere where we would like to help and like to get involved in, that we can at least kind of shape those conversations. I think it's very difficult sometimes to know the best place to start. And like I say, you know, even if it's just that increasingly we are a bit of a clearinghouse for a lot of these questions and conversations, we can put people either, you know, we can either put people with in-house expertise on this, or connect you with people who've done it already, you know, and we're completely agnostic about this you know, we're not going to be like, oh, you shouldn't be using X provider. We can say, you know, have you considered doing this, which other people have done? And I think I'm very keen that the catalogue becomes a repository of knowledge around APIs rather than just a list of APIs, because I think that's more useful. If you're looking to stand up a government API, then you may well be right at the beginning of the journey. And so we're going to start putting case studies up there, which hopefully will help, but also, and yeah, I hate to use the word consultancy, but we do feel like we can act as a kind of consultancy in inverted commas in those kind of early stages where we're putting you hopefully on the right path. He said, touching wood. But yeah, I mean, you know, drop me a line, Alex, and we should talk. We should sort out a call and we can talk about it in more detail.
I guess from our perspective, that's where the local digital fund has helped. But I think the problem with that is where there's these smaller, arguably more niche things like clinical waste.
Yeah.
They're not the thing that are going to massively move the dial. And so when you're up against things like, we've got one funding work across planning, the open community work project has got a bit further. There's much, well, they've got much bigger numbers in terms of what the potential impact is of a standard in this space. So I think there's a challenge around these smaller scale things and how we make standards for those. Yeah,
I think that it would be nice, and this is very much an ambition rather than something we're capable of doing now, but we are thinking about, you know, putting together templates for this so that we can start from, you know, this is how you build a standard. That obviously has its own challenges, but yeah, we're aware that a lot of these things don't have the resource to be able to spend X amount of time getting the standard exactly right. So yeah, we are, but in some ways it's quite useful to have visibility of those smaller projects and those smaller asks, so that we can maybe work out a way we could build a kit for this kind of thing. Great. Has anyone else got any questions? I'm just amazed I've got to 42 minutes in on my own, which I didn't think was going to happen.
Oh, well done, Charles.
Thanks very much. I mean, I wasn't fishing. Anyway, let me, if we don't have any more questions, let me leave you with, that's our email address, the Data Standards Authority. If you've got a general question, mine is charles.baird@digital.cabinetoffice.gov.uk. Feel free to email me directly or email the team with any questions. As I say, we are very aware that it's not just about getting local government APIs on there, but also helping local authorities get access to central government data, which they might need, and they might not, they might not have the requisite context